right? And we're also going to talk about evidence-based decision making as it relates to dental materials. You guys have been doing that with perio this entire time and you don't even realize it. So when you're giving recommendations on gingivitis, flossing, brushing technique, all of those things have been heavily researched, right? We're not just pulling it out of our rear end and saying, oh, well, I think you should use electric brush because that's what I think, right? No, that's not how it works. There's been a ton of research behind that. And it's the same way with dental materials. We're just using the same theories that you guys have been taught and applying it to dental materials. So we're going to pause on each one of these and just kind of critically think about it, okay? So why should we study dental materials? Number one, to enhance the safety, right? So it is unethical to be using instruments or to be using materials that we're unaware of how to properly use or how to properly dispose of. So it's not just patient safety, but it's also environmental safety. To promote awareness. I printed off some research before I came, and I found out that Arkansas ranks 48 out of 50 in regard to oral health literacy. That's pretty bad, guys. So you would think in 2023, everyone knows how to brush, everyone knows the importance of brushing, everyone knows the importance of keeping your teeth long term for functionality, all of these things. But that's just simply not true. So they also gave some more statistics that I thought would be fun to tell you guys. We are the 50th in adult obesity in women and teen births. We're the 49th in physical inactivity, diabetes, and smoking. We're the 47th in adverse childhood experiences and infant mortality. We're the 46th in maternal mortality. We're the 44th in child mortality. And we're the 42nd in low birth weight live births. That is a recent study as well. It's 2021. So it takes time for things to get published. So anything that was done this year, we probably wouldn't see it until 2025, right? But that is just to kind of let that sink in for a second. I mean, as clinicians, we assume, because it's so important to us and we have all this knowledge, and we just can't wait to tell everybody, right? Not everybody's that way. So we have to promote awareness, even in regard to dental materials, right? Maintain materials properly. When we go into Kroger, Target, Walmart, there used to be just a small section of dental stuff, and now it's like 2 huge aisles. And it's almost intimidating to pick out toothpaste these days. There's so many different toothpastes, right? And everyone's attracted to low cost and something that says whitening, right? Well, we know a whitening toothpaste can only get a surface stain off. It's not going to be an internal solution, right? So we have to think about, are patients maintaining these materials properly on a daily basis? Why? We only see them twice a year. Best case scenario, we see them 4 times a year. They're going to come in and have a problem, right? So the ball's really in their court, exactly how it is with tissue. Flossing, hey, I only see it twice a year. You got to do your end, right? It's the same way with dental materials. And also, the obvious, we talked about it earlier, money doesn't grow on trees. I don't know about you, but I'm on that Baylor budget right now. I'm buying great value everything right now, and you guys are in the same boat. You're in school, not working. This is your job. And some of you have a job outside of here, and I commend you for that. But what I'm trying to say is, we know being in dentistry that crowns, veneers, fillings, they're not cheap. Even with insurance, it's not cheap. And if you don't have insurance, you're in a really big bind. So we want to think about the longevity of the dental material, not just on our end, but we want to educate our patients. Because what, based on our statistics, 9 times out of 10, they don't know, right? To deliver correctly, again, that's an ethical thing. If we're going to be handling these materials or even be involved with it, we have to know how to properly deliver them to our patients in a safe way. So a good example example of this would be certain dental cements have an exothermic reaction, meaning that they give off heat when you mix it. So if you were to put it in somebody's mouth too quickly, you could do a thermal burn to their tissue and not meaning to. And that's gonna be your fault, right? So you have to know the reactions of these materials. And then again, of course, ultimately to educate our patients. My dad, he has crowns from 6 to 11. And after he got them, I'm sure his hygienist told him, but I told him again, all the things he probably didn't hear your dog. I was like, listen, the days of you biting into carrots, apples are over. They're over for you. You can still enjoy them, but you gotta cut them up, put them in the back. Why? Because if you bite into something and you break a crown, it's not repairable. You gotta get a new crown. And that adds up, right? If you got 6 through 11 and you snap off 3 crowns, well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you, right? So this is why we should be studying dental materials. I want you guys to know that dental materials is also known as biomaterials. That is not only important for my exam, but also the board exam. Okay, so I don't know if they're gonna say dental material this, dental material that, or if they're gonna say biomaterial. So from here on out, just know that is used synonymously, okay? So essentially it's the science behind materials, okay? So that's gonna encompass the evolution, the development, properties, manipulation, care, and evaluation of dental materials. And biomaterials includes different principles. So it includes engineering, chemistry, physics, and biology, all the fun sciencey stuff that we love, right? So this study of biomaterials, it's continually evolving. You can think of it in a real life application on technology. I remember when I was in high school, I'm gonna date myself pretty quickly, that I had a razor telephone, a really skinny telephone, and during the day we'd all download different ringtones and we thought they were really cool. That's not the case anymore. If I pulled out a razor telephone, everybody started busting out laughing at me, right? Because it's outdated. Technology has evolved, right? Well, there's still technology associated with materials. Things evolve, things get better. Oh, well, this is good, but we can improve it in this way, right? So just know things that we talk about in this course 5 years from now may be different for you guys. So that's why it's important to stay on your continuing education. And I'm sure your dentist will also help keep you notified of things that they're using that's new, that would ultimately impact you. So it's really important to know that the goal is to deliver optimal health care while delivering minimally invasive dentistry. We should always be thinking about a conservative approach. We don't want to immediately go into an invasive approach. That is not the goal of dentistry. So there's certain things that we have to consider when we're making decisions. The tooth and the tooth supporting structure. What am I referring to when I say the tooth supporting structure? The bone that supports it, right? We also owe it to our patients to try to do something that's pretty for them, right? That's where aesthetics come in. And then, of course, functionality. We don't want to make suggestions that doesn't further their functionality. That's the whole point of teeth, correct? So who should know about dental materials? This is kind of a hierarchy. Ultimately, it's the dentist's responsibility. Then it's the dental hygienist. Why? Because we see the patients more frequently. And the dental assistant should have some sort of idea of what they're working with. Why? Because they work hand in hand with the dentist on the restorative side. And it's really important for us to know why materials behave the way as they do, so that we can help maximize their performance. Again, we're always thinking about longevity when we're talking about dental materials or if we're talking about gum health, right? We don't want it to be for a week. We want it to be long term. So ultimately, this helps ensure the ultimate success of a patient's dental work and contribute to their quality of life, because that's essentially what you're doing. So we have to know about biomaterials, because that's gonna affect our decision. It's gonna affect the choice that we make, which material that we're suggesting to our patients. Manipulation, patient education, and care of all materials used in the dental services. So another thing, just to let you guys know, the book that you have, it's gonna use the term dental auxiliary synonymously with oral health care practitioners. It's the same thing. I'm talking about you guys. I'm talking about dental hygiene. If you see these words, I wanted you to understand what they mean. So our role is to efficiently deliver health care and enhance the productivity of dentists. Sounds kind of like a business transaction, doesn't it? Ultimately, what's best for the patient is gonna trump that. But again, the dental office is a business at the end of the day, right? So we still have to think about that. The dentist is gonna expect you to have these kind of conversations with your patient. Does it not show the code? Well, that's okay, that worked. I'll figure it out. Okay, so how do you think we can enhance the productivity of the dentist? Anybody? Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Say it again, Samantha. Have your x-rays done. What about on the restorative side? Y'all, I'm old.
When we do hygiene checks, we're feeding them restorative patients.
That's true. And how would we do that?
Well, we clean their teeth so they have like a fresh, like select to work, because you don't wanna work with, a bunch of bacteria,
That's true.
like,
Would whitening be considered helping the dentist productivity?
Yes.
Ultimately, they own the business, right? Would selling a sonic hair toothbrush that your office sells, would that help the office? Yeah, productivity refers to money in the dental world. Sorry, I should have specified that. I mean, that can ultimately help them too, yes. So all of these things kind of get put in our court, again, because we spend the most time with our patients. Okay, so we talked about this on Monday. In some states, you can perform intraoral procedures. So what's that's referring to is placing a filling. It's not doing the drilling. We would never have the credentials to do that, okay? However, in some states, and I think it's only a matter of time before Arkansas comes around, but they'll allow for the placement and care of restorative and other therapeutic agents. So this is just essentially other materials that will encompass into that. Now, it's just important to know that laws vary from state to state, and it changes every year. So you have to pay attention to that. That's something that you're looking to do. I know Tennessee offers that. That's where I do my So again, I think it's only a matter of time. But I wanted to clarify that that doesn't mean you'd be drilling on somebody's tooth. Essentially, what that means is the dentist is gonna go in, know their patient, do all the drilling part, and they're gonna say, okay, you know, get in there and do a composite filling, thanks. And then they walk out and they go to the next patient, you know, if you have this credential. So this is essentially called expanded duty function. And in different states, they call it different things. I don't expect you guys to know this. This is just for knowledge, okay? So sometimes they'll call it advanced practice dental therapist. It's always something fancy. Expanded function auxiliaries. Yeah, it just depends on whichever state you work with that they decide to call it. So these expanded function auxiliaries provide restorative services after the dentist has prepared the tooth for the restoration. So these services may include placing and carving of a restorative material. So amalgam has to be carved. It's kind of like a little art project. Finishing of the restorative material. What do you think that's referring to? Adjusting. Good job, Amy. So think of it like when you take a nail file to your nail. You're taking little increments off, just small, you're smoothing it, essentially. That's what finishing is referring to. Taking a preliminary impression for crown and bridge restorations or endodontic procedures. What's a preliminary impression? Just take a guess. Good. Preliminary means before, right? So the standard protocol for a crown and bridge procedure is going to be taking an impression prior, before they make a smaller version of that tooth. And it's to make a temporary version of that tooth for the patient to wear while their fancy crown is being made. Now this is commonly achieved with impression trays, or also known as stop trays, okay? And there's different sizes, and I've got an example on the next slide of what those may look like. They're pre-made, okay? Sometimes they're constructed with metal, sometimes they're plastic. You could have a full arch, you could have a quad tray, it just kind of depends on the procedure that you're doing. And again, examples of why you would need to take an impression could be for a crown, it could be for an inlay, for an onlay, a denture, whitening trays. There's a lot of reasons why we need an impression of somebody's mouth. Why? Or a knock guard. Everybody's mouth's different, right? My impression is going to be different than Ashley's. So my crown needs to fit my mouth, not Ashley's mouth, right? It's custom. And of course, the more accurate the impression, the better the prosthesis is. That's why it's so crucial that we get a good impression. It normally takes about 2 weeks for a crown to be made. And think about how angry somebody's gonna be if they come in that 2 weeks, they're ready to have their pretty crown that they paid $900 for. And it doesn't fit because we got a poor impression. So technique is crucial with impressions. And this is just an example of the trays. They have different sizes. I have to have a large. Why? Because I have a big mouth and big horse teeth. Again, you could have quadrant trays or full. So what do you think the average cost is in Arkansas for a crown? Yeah, it's gone up. Now it's about 1,000. Woo! It's a pretty penny, isn't it? Okay. This slide is kind of talking about in very special circumstances. That's why it says non-traditional role. In some states, under specific circumstances, if you were to have the expanded duty auxiliary credentials, okay? In those special circumstances, you can provide basic preventative and restorative treatment to children and adults under general supervision of the dentist. This is typically seen in areas that have a shortage of healthcare professionals. So like on Indian reservations, this is very common. Or rural areas like Alaska. And in those special circumstances, they will train someone with our credentials to do more than we would be able to with expanded functions. So for example, in some cases, and depending on the state, you could do an extraction. And they would teach you how to do things like that. Again, it's non-traditional and it's very specific circumstances. You would have had to already have your expanded duties credentials, and they're gonna help you learn other roles that we have no idea about, right? So just to let you know that it's out there. And I have to admit, I've always wanted to extract it too. So kind of getting back to it, all oral health practitioners must have a complete, comprehensive understanding of the potential hazards in the manipulation of a material, the disposal of a material, and be educated on how to handle them safely. Background knowledge of the basic principles of the materials is essential to appreciate the selection of a particular restoration or treatment for each patient, right? We look at our patient as an individual. We don't give everybody the same recommendation, right? So again, in many circumstances, it is in our court to educate our patients on why the dentist has made a certain recommendation. So it's really important to know that dental materials have different classifications: preventative, restorative, and auxiliary. We're going to go into each one. So it's important to know there's no perfect material out there. If so, I'm sure it would be out of stock. So the perfect material does not exist. When we start talking about materials, I want you to start thinking about these lists here. Is it biocompatible? Does anybody know what that means? It's okay if you don't, I'm just curious. To be biocompatible means that you don't impede on living tissue. Our teeth and our tissue are living, right? So we want to make sure the materials that we're using are biocompatible, that they're aesthetic. It would be ideal if they bonded permanently to the tooth, but most of them don't, permanently. I mean, I think it's safe to say that long term, but permanently, there's not something out there currently that does that. And it would also be nice if it was useful in regenerating missing tissues, and that's actually the big deal in dental research right now. They're trying to figure out a way to grow another tooth for somebody. I'm sure it'll take many years for them to figure that out, but that is currently what they're working on. We talked about evidence-based dentistry at the very beginning as one of our objectives. So essentially what this is, it's an approach to oral health care that requires the combination of clinically relevant scientific information relating to that patient's oral history and medical history with the dentist and the clinician's expertise and the patient's treatment needs and preferences. Again, you've been doing this in clinic all the time in relation to tissue, gingivitis, periodontitis, SRP. So these are the elements of evidence-based dentistry. So the science behind it, the research, the clinician's experience and expertise, and then the patient's needs and preferences. So you may come into a situation where what's best, the best option for your patient isn't the option that they want to do. And you'll probably come across that a lot, and that's fine. It's not our job to make decisions for our patients, right? Our job is to provide them with all the information necessary so they can make an informed decision. And then the ball's in their court from there. So again, this helps the clinician make decisions about what is relevant to incorporate within their daily practice. And this is just examples of questions that may impact you when you're in private practice, right? So how does your practice make decisions regarding the techniques, technology, and products used? That's a conversation you would need to have with your employer. Things you want to know on the front end. Scientific literature, that can be dealing with continuing education, because continuing education is based on research. I, as a clinician, always try products, even if it's not something that I would want to use on a daily basis, because if I don't have that personal experience with the product, I don't know how to make recommendations. So anytime something new comes out, I'll go buy it. I'll just be like, okay. One of my best friends is a principal, and she is very motivated She's always sending me something from Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And so I'll order it and just see what it's about, how cheesy it is, and I'll kind of do my own little research and then send it back to her like, hey, I think this is a bad idea because X, Y, Z. Hey, your first indication should be that you found it on Instagram. Okay, right? I don't think that's a trusted resource, but, you know, hey, I'll try it. How does your office stay informed about new advances? They may expect you to be the one that keeps everybody informed. I'm not sure, it depends on who you work for, so you wanna know that on the front end during your interview, right? And how do you incorporate the patient's needs and choices into your decision-making process? And I think this is a lot where culture comes in. This is where finances come in, right? I've had, previous dentist that I worked for was Indian. Wonderful dentist. Well-known cosmetic dentist here in town. Great employer. And I saw a lot of his family. And there was kind of a disconnect for the older people within his family on preventative work. We'll be like, okay, I need to see you in 4 months, I'll see you then. And they're like, no, I'll see you next year. What am I going to say? I mean, that's my employer's grandmother, right? I mean, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Oh, I'd love to see you in 4 months, but I respect if that's the protocol you want to follow. I'll be sure to document that. I have to respect their decision, right? My job is not to make that decision for them. My job is just to educate them. Oh, well, you know, research tells us that really need to see you twice a year, but I respect your decision. If you want to see me once a year, that's fine, right? I think this is really important. Evidence alone does not replace clinical expertise or input from the patient. This is going to come into play with AI. AI has become a big deal, and it's just a matter of time before it hits the medical profession and before it hits the dental profession. How many of you use ChatGPT? Come on, someone. Thank you, Tyra. Okay. AI has become a big deal. And I think it's important for us to note this because our patients are going to be using stuff like this, right? So evidence alone doesn't replace the clinical expertise. Let's kind of think about that for a second. So let's say, I'm just going to give a scenario. Random. I didn't have a script. Let's say we have a patient who lost tooth number 13. Darn, it's in the smile zone. That really stings, doesn't it? Okay, so let's think about our options that we would tell the patient. What could we do? What could the dentist do to help them? Yeah, speak up, remember, I'm old. Bridge. Option 1, bridge. Implant. Partial. Good job. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a little more information on the patient now. The patient is in her 40s. She's got 2 kids, y'all's age, in college. Bridge isn't feasible. No, time out. Let's just say finances are not ideal. Where do we go? Technically, best option's implant. Why? It's the Lone Ranger. We don't have to cut perfectly good tooth down to make a bridge. But what else about an implant? It's expensive. You also have to be a candidate. We have to make sure you have enough supporting bone to even have it, right? So even though that's the best option, based on our patient's needs, which include financial needs, we owe it to that person to say, hey, best option's probably gonna be implant. I realize money doesn't grow on trees. It's expensive and it takes a while to get it achieved. You also have to be a candidate for that. Option 2, bridge. Bridge, it's beautiful. No one's gonna know that it's there. It's also an investment. It's gonna be mid-level investment. Downfall of a bridge is you gotta clean underneath it. Most people don't do that, we know that, right? And, where was I going? Hold on. You have to clean under it, and we have to grind down 2 perfectly good teeth because because that's how that restoration works. So just to let you know that, we're gonna have to deal with perfectly good teeth to make this work. Or option 3, partial. That can impact your speech. Has anyone spoken with a retainer in their mouth? If any of my friends call me after 8 p.m., I'm like, oh. Because I had to have braces twice. And I broke my retainer still, yay for me. So it impacts your speech, right? They can start looking ugly after a while. Why? Because they collect stain. It's not porcelain, right? But it is the least amount of investment, but we owe it to our patient to tell them that. That's up to them, what they wanna do. That's what that means. The evidence would say that the implant's the best option, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about the input from the patient, okay? So again, evidence-based dentistry requires an understanding of new concepts. If you don't know new concepts, you can't mention it to your patients, right? And it's important for us to know the cause and effect relationship between those materials selected and the success of treatment rendered. Perfect example would be implant. If someone's a smoker, odds are it's gonna be a poor prognosis for their implant. It directly impacts healing. And you have to have really good healing to have an implant integrate with bone. So just things you have to think about. Just for your knowledge, the ADA offers a website for us to access that talks about new concepts, research, things that's going on, and that's the link for that. So kind of diving into the history of dental materials, which I enjoy. I love archaeology, anything archaeology related, I love. I thought this was really interesting. So the concept of using materials to either restore, replace, anything in that matter, actually predates Christianity. It's a long time ago. So the diet of cavemen was a chief contributor to dental disease. So a lot of their foods had dirt, sand, grit. We can imagine that that would be very abrasive, right? This is pretty awesome. Research has revealed mummies show loss of teeth due to abscess and periodontal disease as early as 2500 BCE. I just think that's so interesting that they can find that. They can find that out through tests now. This shows you how much of a nerd I am. Has anybody watched on Discovery or Disney Plus? Y'all ever watch any of the documentaries regarding archaeology? There's a gentleman, archaeologist called Dr. Zahi Hawass. He's the guy that's got the Indiana Jones map. And my husband and I went to Dallas to one of his symposiums, and that's where they kind of talk about the recent research. And he was talking about this female mummy that they found. They couldn't figure out who she was. They have all this DNA, and they're trying to create family trees, essentially, so they're good. And they just were really stumped with this mummy, so they went back to the location that they found this mummy. And they found a broken tooth that they had missed in one of the drawers where the Egyptians kind of keep organs and stuff like that based on their religion. Well, they had taken an x-ray, and they had found out that the mummy that they couldn't figure out who it was, they found out who it was based on that broken tooth. It fit exactly into that mummy's mouth. Just from the tooth, they found out who that mummy was. So I think that's pretty cool. Research has also shown the presence of toothpicks among the oldest known human fossils. So here we are thinking that we're fancy with toothpicks. They've been around a long time. Maybe they don't look the same as they do now, but anyways. So there's no evidence of restorative dentistry until about 600 to 300 BCE. The Etruscans were back during the Roman era, okay? So they lived in modern day Tuscany, what we would consider Tuscany now is where they lived. And they used to create bridges from gold and from cadaver teeth. Can you imagine somebody else's teeth in your mouth? You know, bone grafts are from some cadavers. So, I mean, still not so far-fetched in our day and age. But just a tooth, I don't know, I don't think I want somebody else's tooth in my mouth. The Romans really valued their teeth, and they become more skilled with gold as well, for bridges, for partials, and they even took a stab at making dentures. And in the mid-1800s, most dental treatment was extraction. Why do we think that is? They didn't have the resources that we have now. They didn't have the knowledge about disease like we do. I thought this was also interesting that they would use ivory from a hippopotamus for a denture. And because it got so difficult grinding down that ivory, they started joining the mandibular and maxillary dentures. Looks like it just kind of popped in your mouth. I mean, don't laugh too hard because it may spring right out of your mouth, right? Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be? So Pierre Fauchard is actually the man who developed this, and he's known as the father of modern dentistry. I would highlight that. So he published a book in 1728. It's called The Surgeon Dentist. And he devoted part of this book to this theory of the dentures. And actually, George Washington had several sets of these type of dentures. And again, I'm not expecting you to memorize all of these dates. This is for background knowledge for you guys to just see how far we've come. Okay, so I don't want you to stress out so much about the dates. Okay? So in the late 1700s in France, that's when we start seeing porcelain for restorations, and this point, dentures. In 1788, King Louis come across this patent, and he gave it to his dentist for porcelain teeth, so individual teeth at that point. And has anyone ever heard of Goodyear tires? Crazy to think this family dates back that far. So the Goodyear brothers, they actually gained a patent on rubber that's called vulcanite, and that was denture bases in World War II. So again, they were making different materials. This shows the hippopotamus one, and it really depends on the region, on the resources that they had to try and come up with dental materials. Silver paste is first mentioned by the Chinese in 659 CE. And more than 1,000 years later, France produced it from shavings of coins mixed with mercury to produce a paste that we now know as amalgam. However, in 1846, the American Society of the Dental Surgeons prohibited the use of this because of the high mercury content. It was really starting to make people really sick and even pass away. So there was this huge disagreement over the value and safety of this, that it became known as the amalgam or highlight. Does G.B. Black look familiar to you guys? What do we know G.B. Black from? Community water fluoridation, right? So I think this is really important to note, to start thinking about for board exam. All the things G.B. Black is known for, right? Because we just think about it in the community. But now, here he pops up with dental materials, right? So, after the war ended, he's part of the reason why the amalgam war ended in 1895, because he was trial and error trying to develop an acceptable formula of amalgam that wouldn't make people so sick. In 1855, gold gained popularity for restorations, and I would say it's still popular today. And around this time, dental cements were also introduced. So I'm curious if anybody's familiar with the use of dental cement. It looks like it works. Let's try it. Let's give it a whirl. Yeah. Have you all ever used Polaroid? Oh, it's fun. It's a real-time poll. It's kind of like Kahoot. Yeah, you just text.
No.
slide didn't show that at the top.
Oh, you
for a
texted
while.
it. Okay, hold on.
This kind of keeps you guys awake too.
What's wrong in session then?
I think we were supposed to type the call sheet.
What does yours say? What did it tell you?
This? I don't know. I don't know
Oh, you got something? Is that what came in and you clicked on it?
See if that
yet.
works.
Yeah,
Oh, so I click on this, the fulleverywhere.com?
that's what I did.
Okay.
Activate.
I don't know. I'm apparently making the whole account.
We will work it out. We'll figure it out.
I don't know. I just,
So you can either say yes or no.
no,
Just
this
type it in
isn't.
like an answer.
Is that not right?
I can't.
Do what?
It says, it's either A or B or A.
Okay, A is yes, B is no.
Okay, then I'll just put,
Do you just put it in there?
I guess. What?
B is no. So we don't click on that. Did you click on
See if
the
it's A.
little website thing?
It's not working though.
So did it work?
I have no idea. I just typed A. I don't know. Look, I don't put a dot on
You
it.
know how to use Dennis something.
You're supposed to be able to.
No, I don't know
say
how to
yes or
use
no.
it. It just says I really
Feel
want to
like A
use it. I
says-
use it for braces. That's all I know.
Have nothing to tell me?
Oh, okay.
To put the brackets on.
Gotcha.
So I mean, kind of make it if I'm right.
Yeah, I guess
I
so.
remember they told me that it's submit and I had to scrape it on. So. Yeah, it was not fun. It was not fun.
Okay, well, it showed up on here. Okay, good. So 78% aren't familiar with dental cement, and then 21 is. I'm assuming our assistants. Yeah. So, it may surprise you that dental cement can actually be used for a lot of different things. The most common way that dental cement is used is to adhere a crown, a veneer, an inlay, an onlay to the tooth. So think of it like you've got your crown, you flip it upside down and it's hollow, so that way it fits onto the tooth. And that's where you put your dental cement on, and then you put it on the tooth. Some cement will naturally harden on its own. Other cements have to have an acceleration process, meaning that maybe we've got to get a light bulb. Other cement that you're gonna learn about, for example, glass ionomer cement, can be used as a temporary filament. And it actually provides fluoride to the tooth. So that's something that we'll learn more about throughout class. So in 1907, William Taggart produced a method for gold inlays. I mean, that's pretty early, 1907. We're thinking about inlays. 1955, introduction to acid etch. What's something you guys would use etch with? Sealant. So again, the use of synthetic resins. Resin is a fancy word for composite. Okay, so when you hear me use the term resin, that's what I'm referring to. What's a composite? A tooth color filling, right? So the use of synthetic resins, what's synthetic mean? It's man-made, right? I just don't ever want to assume that y'all can understand what I'm talking about, so I apologize if that seems elementary, okay? So the use of man-made composite and etch evolved into one of the most popular restorative materials known as composite resin. 1874, fluoride was first mentioned, and in 1901, long story short, Dr. McKay had a lot of patients present into his clinic, we'll talk about this more in community, present with these staining on their teeth. And the more they kind of looked into it, it wasn't cavitated, why is the stain here? That's when they started figuring out, oh, it has to do with the water. It has to do with the fluoride inside of the water. So this is where we see G.B. Black again. G.B. Black and Dr. McKay determined that it was the drinking water that was a factor. So that's where we see in 1945, the first community water program. And you can guarantee that's going to be on board exam. And we'll always ask about community water fluoridation. For those of you who like things in graph form, I've already made you some graphs. You're welcome. So most triumphs and atrocities of dentistry were discovered through trial and error, but that's not the case anymore. Now it's unethical to do things trial and error. We have to go through formal research. In 1839, the first attempt of research was made by the American Society of Dental Surgeons, and that had to do with amalgam. And in 1930, they came up with the specifications for an amalgam alloy. The word alloy means mixture. So it's not just amalgam. There are multiple components in amalgam now to make it safe. And that will be discussed in a future lecture, just to help you understand what that word means. Alloy means a mixture of metals. So the American Dental Association was founded in 1859, and essentially their role is to help elevate and regulate the practice of dentistry. In 1930, they decided to come up with some guidelines for testing of products that we use in the dental field. And in 1931, they awarded the first seal of acceptance. Now, it's strictly a volunteer program, which is interesting. These are people that really have a passion to make sure that there's safe products out there, right? So more than 300 consumer dental products carry the ADA seal of acceptance. So that's where that comes from. That can include toothpaste, mouth rinse, toothbrush, sugar-free gum, anything that you can think of in regard to the dental field. Now, there's a broad spectrum of requirements that have to be met for them to provide this seal. Now we're going to kind of go into some nonprofit organizations, and I'm going to let you know what I want you to really focus and hone in on regarding these, okay? So the first one is going to be ANIS. ANIS is the American National Standards Institute. Again, they're a nonprofit organization. They were founded pretty early on in 1918. And essentially, they do biological tests for products. What's going to impact us, and something you need to know for my exam, probably the board exam, is the ANSI ADA specification number 41. So this represents the establishment of tests for dental materials. The FDA, many of you have probably heard about the FDA. So it's the Food and Drug Administration. And it's really interesting to see what they're actually responsible for. It's important to know they're one of the oldest consumer protection agencies. So they're making sure that products meet certain standards of safety and of efficacy. And highlight, originally did not include medical and dental device safety, but now it does. So in 1976, that's when they gained authority to look at the safety for medical and dental devices. You wouldn't initially think that when you read Food and Drug Administration, right? So they have 3 classifications important to know these classifications. So it kind of goes into a hierarchy. Class 1, lowest risk, could be a box of gloves. Class 2, these are products that are kind of mid-level, okay? So these products are required to meet a performance standard. An example of that could be filling material, composite, amalgam. Class 3, remember we're on a hierarchy. So class 3 is gonna be the most regulated. That's gonna deal with products that either support or sustain life. So an example of that could be an implant or any kind of bone grafting material. So again, really important to know those. There are international agencies. We've had some hygienists in the past that have moved to Germany, that have moved to Europe, and, go practice over there, and they're still regulated under these agencies. And the FDI, World Trade Federation, is one. And the second one is ISO, or otherwise known as the International Organization for Standardization. Say that 5 times in a row. And again, they both represent standards on an international level. So, dental materials today are a lot better than they used to be, right? We're not using hippopotamus ivory, and we're not using amalgam that is killing people, right? But these materials still need improvement. There's not a perfect material out there, and they're gonna constantly evolve. Again, things that you learned in this class may change in 5 years, so just bear that in mind. And that's the goal, because dental caries is a major global public health problem. Dental hygiene is in the public health realm. And why we are so crucial to the dental office is because periodontal disease continues to be the leading cause of tooth loss. Still in 2023, we went over the statistics earlier. 48 out of 50 states, we are the 48th lowest in oral health literacy. Our jobs are so crucial. You guys are impacting people's lives and you don't even realize it. How much you're impacting their life. So we talked about future development. The biggest deal right now is any kind of implant therapy or tissue regeneration is what they're calling it. So those are things that you might see pop up in the future. That's because the demand for aesthetics is a huge motivating factor for our patients. Another thing that you'll see is nanotechnology. And essentially, nanotechnology is smaller versions of materials that they already have that would help with periodontal ligament augmentation. That's pretty cool. Can you just guess a patient that would need something like this? So we're dealing with the PDL. Nobody's got a guess? Boom, Macy, good job. Bruxism. Bruxism is huge. How many patients do we see a day that has bruxism? I clinch. Why? Because I have stress in my life. Just call it like it is, right? Because it's such a global issue. If we could regenerate the PDL, because when you have bruxism, what happens is it gets loosey-goosey. It's not tight around your tooth anymore. So they're looking into ways to help with that. That's pretty cool. And then, of course, with supporting bone. They're always looking on ways to improve grafting. So it's important to know that all of those organizations that we talked about, they're committed to this motivation of more research, helping our patients, having less invasive ways to help our patients. Let's take a 20-minute, so around 10:50 to 10:55, we're gonna start the meeting. I need a break on my voice, and I probably need to go to the bathroom, so let's take a 20 minute.
Oh, you're filling out those questions too?